Oh my God, Callum Ferguson, we are here in the same place at the same time, in the same frame.
Honestly, you wouldn't read about it. Who would have thought after all this time? We thought it would never happen, and it has. It's incredible here for the Women's Ashes.
Yeah, I've started to think people, that whole thing about have you ever seen them in the same room at the same time?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's now been done.
We are not the same person,
No.
just so you know that.
That's right.
Well, let's get on with the show. Hello everyone and welcome to Timed Out for Sporting News with me, Melinda Farrell, and Callum Ferguson here at Adelaide Oval, getting ready for some Women's Ashes stuff, which is pretty exciting.
It is exciting. We're pumped. It's we've just seen the Aussies triumph strongly in the men's Ashes. Let's see what happens in the women's game.
Yeah, well, let's start on this. Now, I'm doing the timer myself today, so I'm going to start. Okay.
Beautiful.
Couple of big talking points. One of them is Alana Smith instead of Amanda Jade Wellington, took 3 wickets in the game against England A for Australia A. Having watched quite a bit of the women's game and those 2 leg spinners, what do you make of that decision?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I thought that Amanda Jade Wellington would have got the nod over Alana King, but that didn't happen. And I think Alana King's a fantastic bowler. She's very economical, keeps things very tight, and maintains the pressure. Probably a slightly more defensive option than Amanda Jade Wellington, who really is someone who likes to throw them up a little bit more, really give it a rip, and mix her pace up from there. So, the difference is probably the fact that Alana King will probably bowl a little bit quicker on average and really attack those stumps. Amanda Jade will probably throw the ball up a little bit more, try and entice some bigger shots and see if she can get players to make mistakes from there. So I was a little bit surprised, to be honest. I probably would have picked Amanda Jade Wellington and backed my quicks to bowl well and keep it tight and take wickets as well. But I would have gone the aggressive option. That's just my natural inclination.
Well, we've got different formats in this series. So we've got the 3 ODIs, 3 T20s and the Test match. Could there have been a case, do you think, for picking one for, say, white ball and one for red ball? I guess perhaps also with Amanda Jade Wellington having a bit more experience of international cricket? Yeah,
look, I would have loved to have seen both in the squad. You never know. Injuries happen, and it might actually, we might start to see wickets play a bit slower and turn as we get further into the summer as well with the dry weather, and it's certainly hot here today. So and windy. Yeah, it's a real dry northerly coming through the ground. So it's going to be interesting to see what the plan is from the Australian point of view. I suppose at the moment there's only one leggy in the squad, so you'd have to say the plan is to play Alana King all the way through.
Now, another big talking point has been around Elysse Perry and her inclusion or non-inclusion in the T20s, and just generally where she is in that side. There's probably more pressure on her in this series than there has been in her entire career. What do you make of it? Do you think she's going to be able to sort of reinvent herself again as she has in the past? Or are we maybe seeing sort of the last phase of her career?
Yeah, look, she still looks in fantastic condition physically. She's still getting around well. Looks like she's charging into bowl well. Maybe hasn't quite had the rhythm that she's had in the past. There's been a few injuries over the last few years, but certainly I feel like she's still got plenty of international cricket ahead of her. I know there's been a lot of talk about her strike rates because she's still making runs over the last few years. The concern's been her strike rates. Now, I wonder whether there's been enough feedback and direct feedback saying this is what we want out of you, because she's far too talented to have received that feedback and not actually been able to rectify it. I feel like, I just wonder whether the coaching's quite been right around that role. So I feel like she'll reinvent herself. She's got all the shots in the book. She's able to increase her strike rate if need be. I've seen plenty of players do it in the past. They've been labelled as being too slow at the crease and then proved everyone wrong. And if anyone's going to prove anyone wrong in the women's game, I think it's Elysse Perry, because she's got so much skill with bat and ball and in the field.
Yeah, she does. And it's also worth pointing out, it's interesting to me, she did have that slower strike rate, but then she had that period when she captained the Sydney Sixers a couple of years ago and opened the batting, and her strike rate actually went up significantly. So she has done it before. Yes, it's just a really interesting one.
Yeah, it is. I think you've also got to take into consideration the situation the team's in when she's at the crease as well. So she made quite a few runs this season in the WBBL, and I thought she was batting quite well. but her team was in a hole most of the time. They kept losing 4-5 in the first 8 overs. And then the team's miles behind. They require her to be there at the back end. So she's got to manage her way through to the last few overs to give the team a chance. So it's really important that we take all of that stuff into consideration, not just look at the raw numbers without any context to it.
Side note, I just am really happy that the media, that we're having these discussions, fans are having these discussions about, crickety things of who should be playing and who's in form and who's out of form. I feel like we're moving to the next stage of media coverage instead of just going, isn't it nice, that they're playing and hurrah, and isn't women's cricket good? I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, next topic up. Well, let's go back to we've had the washers. Now the mashers are done and dusted. In the end, we both made... I've got to start the timer, haven't I? I have to remember to start the timer or I'll get in trouble. Here we go. There we are. Right, we're on. Now, we had our predictions. Neither of us got it right. You said 3-1. You were closer than me. I said 2-2 because I like to sit on the fence. So much in the wash-up here. Obviously, England have a lot of questions they're going to have to answer and probably personnel changes. Yeah. When it comes to Australia, there were some questions there at the start. Do you think that England essentially being not very good in the end made Australia look a bit better than they are? Do we have the answers to the questions that we might have had at the start of the summer?
Look, I feel like the Australian team, they found themselves in a better position than what they thought. And that actually was exactly what happened with the T20 World Cup as well. There was a lot of, a lot of conversations around the fact that, the Australians, there's no depth. Look at the performances leading into the T20 World Cup. The Australians didn't put out a full-strength T20 side for 18 months leading into the World Cup. They had a whole lot of reasons why, players resting, injuries, and then basically wanting to blood some players as well. So I felt like the Australians this summer actually proved to be better than what everyone thought, and I actually think they are better than what everyone thought. It's not just a facade, it's not just England played poorly. So I don't think Australia allowed them to. England really did muck up the start of day one in the first test. They had a chance to get a foothold in the series and they coughed it up, or handballed it over really, just handed it to Australia. We'll have a bat on a wicket that's been under covers for 2 weeks. So that was a tough one for England, but Australia took full toll and never let England up off the canvas. So going into all these test matches in the subcontinent coming up for the Australian team, I actually feel like we've got great depth in the fast bowling department. We've got bowlers that bowl high pressure stuff, relentless, top of off stump, don't allow you to score freely, don't bowl a lot of bad balls. So with that depth, that leaves you in good shape going overseas. Nathan Lyon, I think, is bowling really well. Obviously didn't bowl in the last test, but I thought he bowled well in this series. So that bodes well going forward. Mitch Swepson, I'm looking forward to seeing him get an opportunity. There's every chance he'll play some test cricket over the next 12, 18 months, which is really exciting. And I think he's a very good bowler. So I think Australia are in great shape. Selection around the batting is going to be interesting, but I think Usman Khawaja getting a test match at the top of the order, the selectors have shown their hand, I think, and they feel like he's going to be a great option over in the subcontinent, where if you get in as an opener when it's flat in the first innings and go big, you can win a test match for your team. Usman's shown that ability to do. Once he gets into the innings, he goes deep.
There's been a bit of social media chatting. Glenn Maxwell went absolutely ballistic in this big
didn't
match.
he?
It was absolutely extraordinary. Now, I've seen a bit of debate around about, whether or not that means that they should be considering, bearing in mind subcontinent, all the cricket that's coming up there, if he should be considered to come back into the Australian side. He is the only current Australian, apart from Steve Smith, who has a century in the subcontinent in India 2017 at Ranchi, which was brilliant. Just wondering what you think of that whole argument when you're talking about Australia's batting lineup and where they're going to be playing. Do you think that's sensible, or do you just think people were just going crazy because he basically went the TONK to probably not the best spinners in a T20 match in the BBL, dead rubber?
Yeah, look, Glenn Maxwell's a superstar. We all know that. We know the talent he's got and the ability to hurt bad bowling and good bowling. Whatever comes at him, he's every chance of putting it to the sword. It doesn't matter who's bowling it generally. Glenn Maxwell, if he's on, he's on. So I think the idea of him coming back into Test cricket, having spoken to him recently, he'd love to. It's certainly something that he covets, playing Test cricket for Australia. And I'm not necessarily of the belief that he needs to play huge amounts of Shield cricket to be ready to go. I think playing international cricket, whether it be T20, one-day cricket, I think that would leave him pretty well prepared for his style of role. I just don't think it'll happen. I can't see the Australian cricket team going to a guy who hasn't played first-class cricket for so long. I'd love to see it. It's hard to find a spot for him at the moment. It would be probably on the back of a couple of players having a really tough run. And there are a lot of games going to be played over in the subcontinent coming up, UAE and Pakistan, not UAE. So,
Sri Lanka
as well, and India. So there's going to be a lot of Test cricket played over in dusty, dry conditions. Glenn Maxwell's very good in those conditions. He's got the ability to score all around the ground against spin, but not just score around the ground, like put enormous pressure on spin bowling. Because if they get it wrong, he can be 100 in no time. So, let alone 60 or 70. So, I feel like if the selectors, George Bailey and crew, were to be really brave, it wouldn't be the worst option because of that natural ability to really hurt spin. And if he's facing medium paces on wickets like over there, where they're so flat and there's not a lot happening, then it would bode pretty well for him. I just can't see it happening, Mel, in all honesty.
Yeah, what about, I guess, sort of related, they did do that thing with Marcus Harris and let him go after saying he was going to get the extended run. Where do you think he is?
Yeah, well, look, to be honest, I reckon he got an extended run, didn't he? He played 4 Test matches, and unfortunately for him, he just wasn't able to grab a couple of those good starts that he made and really pile into 100, 150, which is what a lot of the other guys in the lineup were able to do. I feel like he showed improvement, to be honest. I feel like he looked like he was getting better and more comfortable at the level. He was getting consistent starts, which is something that I was worried about with him. He was sort of getting to 30, 40 or out really, really early and exposing 3 and 4. So
that innings in Melbourne was really, really important for Australia.
It was huge. It was the highest score for the game, and certainly a major contribution towards a win. So he was a little bit unlucky, but I feel like it was probably on the selection to leave him out was on the body of work over a long period of time. He just really hadn't nailed it, and with the way the Australian players were playing, Usman Khawaja coming in and making 200s, he was more squeezed out than he was genuinely you're dropped because you're not playing well. So, and that's tough. It's a really tough position to find yourself in. He'll feel like he deserved to keep going, and that's fair enough because he was probably showing some of the best form of his career. So I feel like the Australian selectors won't forget him. He's still got years ahead of him. I think his best cricket's ahead of him. So he's not going to be a forgotten man. We've got to remember Usman Khawaja's probably got a couple of years left in him, and Marcus has probably got a fair bit more than that.
Yeah, that's true. Very true, very true. All right, time to turn our thoughts, as I start again, to India. I can't believe Virat Kohli is not going to be captain anymore. It just seems really wild to me.
Blew my mind when they made that announcement, or he made the announcement the other day, and it blew my mind when he stepped away from the one-day captaincy and the T20 captaincy. So, look, it'll be interesting to see who takes the reins now. Listening to Jasprit Bumrah talk about Virat Kohli's legacy and what he's brought to the table over his time and how they're going to be really big boots to fill. He brought such a high standard, not just from a playing sense, but from a standards in preparation, making sure you're ready to go physically and skill-wise. Whereas I feel like they'd been a little bit behind up until that moment in time. But certainly he has shown throughout his career a willingness to train harder and longer than most, and then that's transferred into the game out on the ground in all 3 formats. And look where India have been over the last few years. He's been probably the main reason they've gotten this huge jump in improvement in the field with the ball and bat competitive wise, along with Mahendra Singh Dhoni. Those two have just taken Indian cricket to another level, and it's really been a fantastic thing for Test cricket. I love how he has maintained and convinced the rest of the world that Test cricket is still number one. I love that. It's been a huge contribution to international cricket, and as cricket lovers, we can't thank him enough.
I absolutely agree with that. If you had an Indian captain who was just, very white ball focused, very IPL focused, and he's still done all that as well, but his pinning of everything to Test cricket has just been wonderful. I mean, we saw in Australia too, of course, when he went home for the birth of his child after here, Adelaide.
Yeah, that's right.
I wrote mention 36 all out. But we did see Rahane there take on the captaincy, but all the way through that series, and people were like, oh, Virat's gone home and now they've started winning. It was still very much Virat's team, and that partnership between he and Ravi Shastri obviously worked really well. But it's going to be a new era now.
It is. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see who takes over from here. I've just got this feeling KOHL might be the man. Shows a very level and even temperament with the bat and out in the field, and I feel like it's a bit of a change from probably Virat, but it's all about being yourself, and I think if he brings his best self to the role, I think he'll do a really good job. Everything I hear about him is really high end on that side of things, cricket mind and brain around tactics, and the way he plays certainly shows that too. So going to be a really interesting next 3-4 weeks to find out who it's going to be.
We'll stay tuned. Oh, look at that. That was perfect. I don't have the duck sounds on my phone, unfortunately. But thank you so much. Really looking forward to the Women's Ashes now as we go forward. But heaps going on around the world of cricket, of course. We'll be back to discuss more of it. So whatever you're doing this week, I hope you enjoy watching your cricket. Until then, see you later.
Cheerio.